Thank you for coming to Mentor Series this afternoon. My name is Angie Wilasek, and I am the Mentor Series Coordinator here at the RVA. Today's presentation, Developing Grit to Preserve in School and Life, is being brought to us by our very own RVA teachers, Carrie Logterman and Allison Miller. I would like to thank our presenters for taking the time to discuss this very beneficial topic with all of us. I'm looking forward to learn tips and tricks and helping them succeed in their education as well as in their own lives. With that being said, I would like to welcome Carrie and Allison. At this time, I will turn the things over and we can learn more.
All right. Well, I'm Carrie and I have been with the RVA. I was thinking about this. I think this is going on my almost 9th year, which is crazy. Time flies. Allison, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Allison Miller, and this is my 4th year, but it feels like the first year was a really long time ago. So I don't know, Carrie, but this is my 4th year.
I guess we have grit. We've made it through.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. So please, at any point, feel free to jump in, ask questions. We will have some time at the end too for questions, but most certainly we can make it interactive if you have things during the presentation as well. So this is a topic that I think we both feel very passionate about, having our own kids, but also with kids and the things we see in the classroom, and maybe not always in RVA, but just kids in general. And so one of the things that I struggle with, and even as we were doing this presentation, is what's the difference between grit and growth mindset, and yet how are they connected? And so we're starting with this slide. Grit is to have a long-term goal that no matter what, you're always working hard and have a motive to achieve that goal. So I think of it as the perseverance to get to that goal no matter what obstacles you have. And growth mindset, on the other hand, is the belief that you can learn and do anything if you work long and hard enough for it. And so that belief part, which is hard, and it's hard for us as adults, let alone kids who have no life experiences. And that's our job as teachers, as well as parents, to help kids develop that. And so we're going to talk about a variety of things today and have some introductions of what this is, but also some ways that you can help your child develop this growth mindset. And so growth mindset is a great idea for developing grit, says Angela Duckworth. And we're going to watch just a little segment of this video, one that actually, you'll love this, that our staff watched in one of our professional development days that we had. We were able to watch this full video. Angela Lee Duckworth has kind of coined the philosophy of growth mindset as well as the term. And so why not learn from the best? So just a short snip of this video. Can you hear it okay? Okay.
When I was 27 years old, I left a very demanding job in management consulting for a job that was even more demanding, teaching. I went to teach 7th graders math in the New York City public schools. And like any teacher, I made quizzes and tests, I gave out homework assignments. When the work came back, I calculated grades. What struck me was that IQ was not the only difference between my best and my worst students. Some of my strongest performers did not have stratospheric IQ scores. Some of my smartest kids weren't doing so well. And that got me thinking. The kinds of things you need to learn in 7th grade math, sure, they're hard. Ratios, decimals, the area of a parallelogram. But these concepts are not impossible. And I was firmly convinced that every one of my students could learn the material if they worked hard and long enough. After several more years of teaching, I came to the conclusion that what we need in education is a much better understanding of students and learning from a motivational perspective, from a psychological perspective. In education, the one thing we know how to measure best is IQ. But what if doing well in school and in life depends on much more than your ability to learn quickly and easily? So I left the classroom and I went to graduate school to become a psychologist. I started studying kids and adults in all kinds of super challenging settings. And in every study, my question was, who is successful here and why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to the National Spelling Bee and tried to predict which children would advance farthest in competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers are still going to be here in teaching by the end of the school year. And of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students? We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. In all those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Can anyone go, yes, definitely. Something that I know myself, it's hard. And it's hard to help kids learn this as well. And so that's why we're here. But I hope that kind of gave you even a bigger overview of where we're coming from. And that video will be linked in here, so you'll be able to have access. I know you wanted to watch the rest of it because I did too. I love watching her. So some of the misconceptions on this topic and of success are that results don't matter and that you have it or you don't. And we know that's not true. You can develop grit, you can develop perseverance. In fact, a lot of people don't have that right from the beginning. And you've probably heard of many famous people over time who have developed the grit that they needed to be successful. They maybe weren't successful all along. And so that is one thing that I think is neat to share with students, to share with your children, even for yourself to take a look at some different ones. And I'm going to put a couple on the screen here. J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter films, books. She wrote the books, obviously, but she talks about in this little blurb how she was rejected by tons of the best publishers in England many, many times before someone in London finally took a chance on her. And now look at how many of our kids read those books, how many adults read those books. And now we have movies because of her books. So she's one example. Milton Hershey, how he searched and searched for a job. His mom, his family finally convinced him how to learn how to make candy. And he liked the idea, so he spent lots of time exploring it. And eventually, I mean, look at where we would be without Hershey Candy Bar Company at this point. There's much more to the company now. But if you think about people like that, for many of them, I think about Michael Jordan. He was cut from his high school basketball team. Many of those famous peoples are in the same boats we are and our kids are. And those are great stories to be able to share with our kids how you can persevere to be someone if you have that mindset and if you have that grit, that long-term goal that that's what you want to do. Doesn't come easy, but it can happen. So what is a fixed versus growth mindset? If you look at it kind of on this little spectrum here, there's a little bit of a mix in the middle, but a fixed growth set is that you have what you have. You have your talents that you're born with, your abilities, your intelligence, and that's never going to change. It's fixed. And I think all of us working with kids, we know that's not the case. We know that's the myth, right? But it's hard to get them to know about growth mindset too. That's a hard thing. We want to protect them from failure. We want them to feel successful and we don't want their feelings hurt. So that growth mindset is that talents, abilities, intelligence can be improved upon over time. So that's kind of the difference. We want them to work toward that growth mindset. And even for ourselves, I mean, as I said, that's a hard thing. A lot of times, especially as an adult, you think to yourself, well, this is just who I am. And really, you have so much more power and potential if you put your mind to it as well. Go for those goals, try something new. And that too is a great example and model for your kids to see you doing those things as well. And on the next slide, I have a little video. We're not going to watch this one, but it is kind of a cartoon version talking about growth mindset versus fixed. And so this will be linked here. You can go ahead and watch it. It's about 5 minutes only, but for time's sake, I'm going to turn it over to Allison, and she is going to talk a little bit about fixed versus growth mindset.
Perfect. So this is kind of, I think about that spectrum as I look at this vision of this, a person's brain. And, on one side, we can see the left side is that fixed mindset versus the growth on the right side. And sometimes I can't draw on the screen, but I feel like when we're in that mixed, we're in the center of these two sides of the brain, right? And so when we're growing, when we're learning, our kids are learning how to think more like we should on the right side, right? Instead of running away from the challenges, we're gonna tackle it, we're gonna try it. It takes time to move yourself over to that right side, or it takes time for our kids to move over to the right side. And it's kind of like talking to ourselves in the positive, right? So instead of telling our kids, like, don't run, right? What do we want them to do instead, right? We want them to walk. And so, when we're giving them feedback and we're helping them move from a fixed to a growth mindset, right? We have to keep the positive talk as well as they need to talk to them positively, right? And so later we'll get into that praise that we use when we talk to kids. You can go ahead, Carrie. So I personally haven't read this book yet. However, this is a great resource for anybody who wants to read more on this idea of growth mindset. And it doesn't have to just be with school, right? We have growth mindset, this mindset of growing ourselves in all areas of our lives. It doesn't have to be just with schoolwork. If we're trying to accomplish something sport-wise, we're trying to accomplish something hobby-wise or whatever. So this is a great book to be able to have it as a resource. Maybe it's a great summer read. I think this is my summer read. So anyway, go ahead, Carrie.
Before we go on, I think that I said that Angela Duckworth was the person who founded the idea of growth mindset. I think it was Carol Dweck, but Angela Duckworth has done a lot of work with it as well. So you'll see some of our resources linked in here. Sorry.
No, that's great. I love Josh's comment about the book club. That would be another one to bring back. Yeah. So this particular slide, I feel like is the why is growth mindset important? All of those positive, moving on that spectrum towards the idea. So instead of stopping, right, they're going to keep going until they succeed. They're going to, they're not going to see something as an obstacle that they can't overcome, right? They're going to want to continue to learning. I'm thinking about even just in school wise, and Angie, I'm just thinking about Miley. I'm thinking about students in general who I feel like have started out with more of a fixed mindset, like I can't do this, and they work on it and they work on it, and it's not a quick process, right? And it's very much, they end up becoming these phrases that you're seeing on the screen, right? They're asking for help. They're motivated to want to figure out how they can figure out how to be better, right? And that it is going to take time. So that's why it's important. We want that mind thinking in that direction. So this is a perfect example of how the brain grows with their effort, right? So this is two different groups of kiddos, math grades, right? Before and after an intervention. So the proof here is that they are learning how to be, with this mind of growth in mind. They're not going to just stop at, okay, I got a bad grade on this. This is something I can improve on. And when they had that different switch in their brain, right, we can see that their grades are increasing. We can see that things are different in their GPA because of the way they're thinking about maybe a previous failure. They're not going to let that define them, right? They're going to work to turn that into a better one. Personal example, I had to take a test that was really important to me. And I had to take it 3 times. And I was determined to get this test under my belt. And it took me several months, but I did it. And so, just keeping with, okay, I got this score on this test, but I'm not done. I'm going to get better. So this video is really great. So this is where we're not going to play it in here also, but this is another video that explains the power of saying yet, right? Like I was talking about with the test I ended up having to take 3 times before I passed it. And so every time I took the test, I thought, you know what, I'm not done here. There's a power in saying yet. There's a power in saying, this is what I got, but this is just yet. There's more to come. And keeping, developing your abilities and, saying, okay, this is the score I got this time. And this woman really talks about how kids need to learn the power of yet, or we all do, right? This is just a bump in the road, but I'm not there yet. This is going to get me there. And so this is a great video for that, in that mind. All right, so on this, I took this quiz. How gritty are you? So if you want to take this quiz or you want your kids to take this quiz, I had a kiddo take this quiz. There's about 10 questions on the quiz. It's really, really basic and simple, but it will tell you how gritty you are. And I already knew halfway through that it was going to give me a grittier score, just because I think I've learned like I'm a perfect example of growth mindset. I used to be fixed and I kept working. And so if you want your kids or yourself to take this grit scale, it is really cool to see kind of where they're at. And it's like a baseline starting point. It's kind of neat. I thought it was great. Perfect.
All right. I put it in the chat box, Mr. Dewey, no cheating on this one. Just teasing. Again, this one for some students, younger students, it might not be the most appropriate little quiz, but for some of your older ones, you may want them to, and just see where they're at, and then take it again in a year or two and see where they're at if you've worked with them on some of these things. All right. So how do we turn information into action, right? What can we do? How can we apply this and translate this to our children and our students? So here's what I would like you to do. Grab a piece of paper. You knew that this wouldn't come without a teacher telling you to do an assignment or something, right? So go ahead, grab a piece of paper, and I just want you to take a minute. And again, this is something that you could do with your children, your family, your students, your kids, whoever. And what I would like you to do is think about something this week that where you made a mistake, and write down that mistake and write down how you made it, how it made you feel. So go ahead, I'll give you a minute to do that. I think most of you are finished. As you finish, I want you to crumple up the piece of paper with the feeling that you had when you made that mistake. Again, you can imagine doing this with your kids, right? Or students. And throw it at the camera, throw it at me. Come on, just pretend. And with the feeling you had or how it made you feel when you made the mistake. And then uncrumple it. Uncrumple it. And if you have, I didn't ask you to bring colored pencils or crayons or anything. If you have a few different colored pens, underline some of those things with some different colors. This isn't really a super important part, but we'll just do it as part of the activity. Make some different colored lines on there. All right, and so the activity, what we ask the kids to do or the students to do is ask them, what do you think those lines represent? They represent the synaptic activity that happens here when you make a mistake. There's a lot going on in your mind, a lot of emotion, a lot of frustration often. And so what they recommend is having the students tape this somewhere visible, so it's visible to them, whether it's in a notebook so no one can see it, but when they open that notebook, oh, there it is, or in a folder or at your desk, as a physical reminder to the students that you do make mistakes, but every time you make a mistake, your brain is strengthened by that. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't have to be a negative. But when I open my notebook, I can say, okay, it's okay. And my brain is stronger now. Mentally, I can refocus, and I know that I will get there at some point. So that's one simple activity that you could do. Again, just getting out those frustrations of that mistake, even, it helps a ton. Another activity, I thought this was kind of a neat one. Again, I could see where maybe some students, this wouldn't work as well as it would for others. But I love this little poem. I'll give you a second to read through it. So talking about what are your, really a discussion with your students or your kids, what are your obstacles? Look at the obstacles that this rose had. How was it going to break through that concrete, right? And how it found a way. And so discussing with your child how your child can break through the concrete and those hard things, just like that rose can, overcoming their obstacles and reaching for those dreams that they have. So that's, again, another small activity that you could do. And this one I thought was fun, a newer one that I've seen. So this is the whoop technique. It's Gabrielle Ottingen's whoop strategy to help develop grit. So you could print this out, you could just write it out, however you'd like to do it. And you see the resource here on the bottom. So their wish for it could be anything. So you could fill this out, you would fill this out as you go. Their wish, what the outcome was, what the obstacle might be or was, and then a plan. So if, then I will, and the action to overcome that obstacle. So just a really simple technique to help your child, break through some of those things, and even just to verbalize and discuss some of those different feelings as well as obstacles, and what I can do instead of being frustrated and getting down on myself. Talking about that not yet, which we will talk about a little bit more here. So just a few different activities. And now, before we move on, Mrs. Miller is going to talk about praise, but Big Life Journal, you'll see on some of our resources, they are listed a lot. That is an amazing website for all different kinds of positive reinforcement. Again, you'll see a lot of them linked here for this topic, but they also have other topics and blogs and things like that if you're interested. All right, Mrs. Miller.
Let's talk about praise. Okay. So the video that I had been referring to before with it looked like the two bones and talking about the not yet, which is what Carrie just referenced. And so a lot of our praise is based on the fact that our abilities can be developed, right? So we don't stop with one failure, we develop and we keep going. And so sometimes our praise, that's a process, right? For us to say, okay, not yet, but we're going to continue to, work on it, and it's a process, and so is our praise. So we want our praise to be a process with our kids as well. And sometimes we think we're doing the right thing with some of our praise. I'm still guilty of it. I work on it all the time with how I use my praise with my kids or even my students. I'm working on my comments back to them to be more specific. But when we give too much praise, they kind of rely on the praise then instead of themselves to be more intrinsically gritty. And so sometimes it can lower their bar. It can make them, the kids feel that our approval is conditional, right? And so we definitely don't want that. They're praise junkies. They become looking for it. They got to have it. It makes kids avoid difficult activities at times. And again, that decrease in intrinsic motivation. Praise is a great thing. Like, we all need praise. It's a great feeling, but it's in how we do it and how we offer it to our kids so that we keep that intrinsic motivation rolling instead of always needing the extrinsic. Go ahead, Carrie. So some of our praise, this is where I work a lot on this, where I want to be specific. Right. I don't want to, it's so easy to say great job or well done. And so for the kid who is in the process of becoming grittier, they need more of a specific type of praise, right? Wow, I noticed your toys are organized so well, or I noticed how you lined up those shoes really, meticulously over there, and maybe they're doing a chore around the house, right? I noticed you stacked the plates really great in the cupboard this time. I really appreciate that, right? Even when they're in community with others, or they're they're with their friends, we want to be specific and saying, wow, that was really generous that you, right? So instead of saying those really overall general things, we want to be specific in what we want to praise them for. Go ahead. And so in addition to not being overly general, we want to be sincere, right? And so this is a big one. And when we are giving them praises based on comparison, right, we're telling them that they're the best, and then they're focusing on the fact that they're better than others, or you finished quicker than your friend, right? So their growth and their mindset isn't focused on what they're growing on necessarily. They're focusing on how they're growing over others, right? So instead, we want to say something like, wow, you've improved since the last time. I really noticed how you use quotation marks around your dialogue this time in your story, being really specific about whatever that personal mastery is that they've just accomplished. You made great progress in your reading, right? Wow, I can't believe it. So we want to make sure that we're really sincere about it, and, not overly false in comparison, for sure, and with others. So mastery versus comparing to others. right? Praise the process. This is where, that's that whole not yet. We want to praise the process of not yet. They're still working on whatever goal it is that they've set out to complete or grow in, right? So we can sometimes do person praise, like you're a talented painter, or this comes natural to you. But if we're working on the process of becoming a better painter, right? Maybe we might say something like, oh, wow, what a great color combination you chose. Or, wow, I love the way you describe the characters in that story. Or, I teach a lot of language arts, so I work on this. But wow, I can tell in that math, I really like how you're solving that equation, or, specific to them. Not you're a math wizard or something like that. You want to be specific in the process of their growth. It's hard to do. And then encouraging versus evaluating, right? So we want to make sure that all of our praise is going to come out in an encouraging way, not in an evaluative way. So like, your room looks great, you cleaned up all your toys, right? Encouraging them to continue that up. You didn't give up even when it was hard. So making that praise encouraging all at the same time as you're giving them the praise that is praising the process. Carrie. So this is an important one. So praise, sometimes we can be too general. So we want to make sure that we're giving reasonable praise. So when we're praising, we want our expectations to be, when you read an entire story, you're not going to just praise them on, wow, you wrote a whole story. I mean, it is wonderful for maybe a student who struggles to write a lot of meteor, something. But when we're giving them too low, we're not being specific enough, okay, on the praise that we want to give them. If we're too high, we might tell them this is the best story I've ever read, right? Which probably isn't true, but we want to give them that praise so that they feel good. So being reasonable about your praise is that you might focus on all the characters in your story are intriguing, or I really love where you went with that setting. That was really great. I liked that. So making sure that you're giving them, enough praise, but not too high of praise in whatever the activity is they're working on. So alternatives to praise, right? So we have a lot of the time we could say thank you, right? So that sometimes we're talking about when we overpraise it, maybe acknowledging their goals. Wow, this even got you closer to that goal, right? Maybe you're asking them questions, and sometimes it's okay to say nothing as they're working through this process of not yet. And you're observing, you're being supportive, you're facilitating. And so it doesn't always have to be, just praise. It can be, wow, thank you so much for that, and giving them some other feedback other than just the praise. It can be hard.
I was just thinking, is anyone feeling like, oh man, I failed in so many areas? And even as teachers, we try to do our best. We know these things, and you probably hear us say some of those things that were on our don't do list, right? I mean, it happens. It's a work in progress. And I think just thinking, and even going back through our slides, thinking about some of these little things that you can implement one at a time. Don't feel overwhelmed, like, oh, I have to totally revamp everything that I'm saying to my kid. It's probably not going to happen, and then you'll be overwhelmed and won't do any of it. So pick and choose some of those things that you can implement right away, whether it's with their schoolwork or cleaning up at home, whatever those goals are, you want to help them focus on. All right, so rephrasing feedback. An example of maybe ineffective form of feedback, as we kind of talked about a little bit ago, you're an awesome reader. Pretty vague. How could you change this to reflect a growth mindset approach? Any ideas? Any thoughts? Let's take a peek. All right. So some ideas might be and are not limited to, I noticed you tried your best to sound that challenging word out. Wow, just acknowledging that effort and that the success sounding it out. Did you find that book challenging? Why or why not? It's that what Allison talked about, asking questions, getting them to reflect on their effort. Did they put in their best effort? And did they like something or not? How are they feeling about their efforts? You use so much expression in your reading voice. Well done. Something, as simple as that, not having to say a lot. Another thing that we talk about with feedback, your statements and your affirmations can encourage growth mindset. And so I'm a huge believer in affirmations because I feel like it changes your brain, the way you are training your brain to think. Instead of always having that negative thought, you can train that brain to have those positive thoughts. And even if the interesting thing about our brain, even if you haven't gotten there yet to whatever it is your affirmation might be, and we'll talk about some examples of those, but your brain starts to believe what you're telling it. You yourself or someone you might think of that student or kid or schoolmate, a peer that you had who always said, I'm so bad at this. I can't do this. Every time you tell yourself that, and maybe it's your own kid for that matter, that is what your brain starts to believe. So think if you taught your kid to say, I can't do this yet, but I will. Having a totally different thought on it can really change how their mind focuses. So turning it into things they can do. I can reach out for support. I can do this. Help them focus on those things, even if there's things they can't do yet. And just with your feedback, having that feedback to help them view failure as a discovery of another way that does not work. So helping them view failure as more of a discovery, like, oh, that didn't work. So what can I do this time? How could I make this different so I could try it again and see if something else might work? It doesn't mean you failed forever. Make being wrong comfortable and taking risks the expectation. And this is so hard, even for us, right? Taking a risk. Oh, what if I fail? What if somebody sees me? Those middle school and high schoolers that never want to turn on their camera, whatever it might be, taking that risk and just saying, it's okay. You are you and you are special and you have something valuable to add to this class. Make it clear that when something is challenging, it's only because your brain is growing stronger. And I know that's a hard thing to help, especially older kids understand. I think that as their minds get set, or we think they're set, they're not, but as they think they know what's going on. But the more we can give out these affirmations and help them deal with these things, I think, and help them turn their phrases around, the more their minds will grow as well. So these are just some simple examples. And affirmations, I think there's a whole section on them later on in our presentation, and they are so powerful if you can get yourself and your kids to start using them. So your statements and affirmations can encourage growth mindset, which we've been talking about. You haven't figured it out yet. You are on the right track. You can do hard things. You can learn anything. Think if those were posted somewhere where they could see those every single day. That's pretty powerful. Or you read through a couple of them before you start school each day. That's what they're going to be focused on and not the negative. So that is huge. How to address this language with your child. It is overwhelming. So helping them shift from focusing on what they can't do to what they're capable of doing. Talking about the negative talk, discussing your failures and being honest about things, you know, how it might not have been easy for you too. And what did you do to persevere to overcome that? This is an article here that will be linked in here that are 7 ways to address the negative self-talk, which is a really good one too. And that's from the big journal Life as well. All right.
Me.
Yeah, is this you? You're
This is
on.
me. Yes. So we, this big word yet, right? Never underestimating the power of yet. And I have an example here in just a second, but it takes time. And I think that's the biggest thing, especially when we're talking to our kids. It's not an overnight process, and it's a longer process. The word yet can help provide grace. That's a huge one, for yourself and your kids, and the gift of time, right? So when we're talking about, developing that, the grit and the growth mindset, right? The grace is one of the biggest thing, as well as confidence. And so, allowing ourselves to mess up and knowing that we're going to do better the next time, because yet is still a process. And, I can do this yet. I'm not good at this yet. My plan didn't work yet. I don't understand yet. I don't know yet. Right. And so we have to help our kids to focus on the fact that it is what it is. And it's the power of waiting until you get to that point where you got it. And so I have a novel that I read with my kids, and I mentioned this to Carrie when we were chatting about this topic. And Where the Red Fern Grows is one of my favorite books. And maybe you've read this out loud to your kids, but I'm on my 3rd child reading it to him. And I'm amazed. If you know the story, the main character wants a couple of coon hounds, right? For going coon hunting. And he saves his money for 2 years to buy these coon hounds. And I just think about him, and every time I read the book, I cry at this part. It just gets me every time, because of the grit of this boy, who he is determined. He has a goal. He's collecting minnows from a creek and selling them. He's doing whatever he can to get these coons. Takes him 2 years. We were reading about the Wright brothers. It took them 4 years to figure out how to get the plane off the ground. And so, it's just a matter of, I can do this, just not yet. I'm getting there. I'm getting closer every single time. So that's a big word to use with your kids. It's just important. So there's my Where the Red Fern Grows push. Just gotta read it. Gotta read it to your kids. But read these affirmations. Go through these affirmations daily, like Carrie was talking about, hanging them up in the house on the mirrors. Giving them new affirmations. This Big Life Journal has so many great tips for working with our kids and using that positive talk around them to develop the growth mindset and the grit that they need to continue on with whatever it is. It doesn't have to be just school. It can be whatever it is in their life that they're working hard on. So I know, Angie, me too.
Absolutely. Yes, these links are all here for you to use to look at a later date. I think you'll love some of them, and I'm going to show you here a few. Might be a little excessive on the resource end of this PowerPoint, but I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll quickly breeze through and show you, but we wanted to give you some tools of things to use in your classroom, in your life, with your kids, with your family. And we do really encourage you to do it right along with them, because honestly, it's amazing how different you feel when you're doing it too, and how your mind will change as well. So this next section is just a ton of resources. This is how to teach growth mindset to kids, a 4-week guide. So if you're looking for those hands-on, they are all here, posters, some that you can even print and hang up. You don't even have to make your own. These ones are fun. You can paint. They're all black and white, so you can paint or color them with your kids. Maybe do one a week, one a month or something, and have them hanging up. This is a good one, The Power of Yet, good old Sesame Street, way back when. You may or may not love the show, but it really is a good song about the power of yet. This is a resource, a new one that we found. It is a paid app and not something the RVA would pay for, of course, my disclosure, but it is a really cool resource called Teen Talks. And if you have teens and you allow them at all to be on social media, you know, the big things are they're watching videos about everything, dances and whatever, everything. But these have anxiety, stress, self-confidence or self-worth, confidence, friendships, schools, grades. So it's a really powerful resource for teens if you're looking for something. So I did link the actual website to this image, so you'll be able to check that out as well. This story, I think I need to read this to my class, actually. I found this one, Ronnie and his grit. Stories provide great opportunities. These are some more summer reads for yourself, because I know you don't have anything better to do in the summer than read. No, these are great resources for you. Just another idea of focusing on growth versus the outcome, watching their accomplishments grow. Again, we put lots of resources, bookmarks, positivity box. These are some of those things, fun things invented by mistake, which is pretty cool. You look at Play-Doh, popsicles, microwave, think of all the things that we use and they were invented by mistake. So if you click on the picture, it will take you to the website as well. You can read more. Songs, books. I told you this was a little excessive. Videos about growth mindset. These are definitely appropriate for elementary as well. YouTube channels, movies and videos. This Big Life Journal does have where you can access free printables. Every Friday, they will email them to you. So some of these resources have came from their free printables that I've gotten. So you can subscribe to that if you wish, once you have this. And so I just want to leave you with an Angela. We started with Angela Duckworth. We're going to end with her quote, being gritty doesn't mean not showing pain or pretending that everything is okay. In fact, when you look at a healthy and successful and giving people, they are extraordinarily metacognitive. They're able to say things like, dude, I totally lost my temper this morning. That ability to reflect on yourself is signature to grit. And so helping ourselves as well as helping our kids and our students to reflect on those feelings and being able to turn those feelings into something a little more positive and focus on that end goal always. Is this getting me closer to where I want to be or who I want to be? Thanks for attending, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you later. Bye.